Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this session on the wireless network here deployed at Devoxx. Thank you for showing interest in what we actually try to do for you, because we do understand that your user experience on the Wi-Fi at an event like this is really important. And we also know that people think about wireless as something very easy, because how difficult can it be to deploy a network that has no wires in it? Can I ask, who of you has deployed their own Wi-Fi at home? Everyone. Who of you has had or experienced issues with the Wi-Fi at home? All of you. Obviously, we encounter the same stuff as you do at home over here. You have difficulties with your neighbors, with conflicting channels, interference. The same applies for us. So if we look at the installation here, we have to take into account about 58 rogue access points that are surrounding us. And they are still counting, because everyone tries to make their own Wi-Fi or sets up their own access point. Sponsors come in, immediately start building their own wireless network. So they all are conflicting with us, and we try still to give all of you the best possible experience. In order to do this, we have used about 800 meters of fiber cable. We have about 4,500 meters of UTP cable. There are 250 access ports on about 20 switches. And we deployed about 47 access points in all of these rooms, which you can see mounted against the trusses and in front of some rooms. So the placement of the APs is not ideal, but as with everything about a temporary conference and any temporary setup, we all live with what we can do. There are a lot of trade-offs we have to make. Wireless is all about making trade-offs. So we have to disable some 2.4 gig radios. We have to live with bad AP placement, not really centered to you, next to the APs in the next room. So it's all not that ideal. In terms of the incoming internet connection, we have about 500 gigabits available for you, both upstream and downstream. The system setup is actually quite simple. We have the internet feed coming in right into the Barracuda F400 firewall, which basically doesn't block anything. So we try to give you a most seamless experience as we can give. This is divided over the switches, going to two controllers with then the little less than 50 Meru, now Fortinet access points deployed. And if we have a quick look at the numbers of the system up to today, the maximum amount of simultaneous users we have had on the network was, well, slightly over 2,600, knowing that there are about 3,500 people in average in these rooms. That's in fact quite a lot, because this is really instantaneous. If we look at the number of unique stations, so that means the unique MAC addresses that we see on the network, then just for today that was slightly less than 4,000. So that means that since you are with 3,500, more than one device is being used per person, quite obviously today. If we look at the numbers from Monday to Thursday, you see that we have seen more than, or nearly 8,000 clients on the network. And their capabilities also differ quite a lot. The numbers are rather low on, say, 11G and 11A. Unfortunately, the number of AC stations is also still quite low, but you see that the majority is on 11N, both 2.4 and 5 gig, and that's what the graphs next to it show as well, which is the number of stations per channel, and then the amount of channel utilization by all of those stations. And quite luckily, and that's also the aim of the setup, this is all well divided. So you can see there are 3 channels in 2.4. It's well divided, the station count per channel. And also the airtime utilization per channel is really well divided into 1/3 for every channel, meaning that roughly you guys are using the deployed equipment up to the maximum, which is also in fact really the case, because just today around I believe it was 12:50, we got 5 alarms stating that some radios, 5 or 6 radios, were really up to the maximum of 128 users per radio. Obviously, the radios can go higher, but this is the limit that we say coded inside the system to really advert and make sure that we pay attention to the fact that you guys are just with too many people on one AP. And that's actually the first time that has happened. We have been using this setup with roughly the same numbers since 2010. So this is the 6th year that both Multicap and DigerWorks are supporting Devoxx in deploying this wireless equipment. And up to now, the deployed system has always held strong. But you do really see the evolution coming from about 1,500 to 1,700 simultaneous users back in 2010, now up to 2,600, 700 users, say within a time frame of 10 seconds that is really connected to the system. If you want to see more numbers, the peak bandwidth that you guys consumed was little less than 400 megabits, so the 500 megabits pipe is still sufficient. We can upgrade it to 1 gigabit if needed, so come on and do your best. The volume that you guys produced from Monday through Wednesday was slightly over 2 terabytes of download traffic and, well, over 750 gigabytes upload, which is rather okay considering the amount of people we have. And if we have a look at what you guys are actually doing, and this is a screenshot of an instantaneous system, then we see that most of you, in terms of volume, produce most of YouTube volume and iTunes, which is updating in the background, etc. But other than that, Google services, Amazon Web Services, Twitter, Facebook, and Spotify. So actually the usual suspects. Good thing that we see is also throughout those 6 years that we have seen that we went from about a 40 to 60% division between unsecured and secured traffic, that we are now almost completely up to 100% SSL encrypted traffic. So that's definitely a good thing. And rather than boring you to death with all of these things, I want to show you some stuff in reality. So this is, for instance, the interface of the controller, but that shows only, say, daytime data rather than over the entire week. If we have a look at the EasyRF Network Manager, we can look back in time and we can see the actual division of clients over the last couple of days, where you see that we had the biggest peak yesterday. This is room 8, for instance, which is the big room on the other side, where about 700 people can sit, and you see that yesterday we had a peak of 664 clients connected to the network, which basically means that nobody listened to the talk and everybody was looking at their iPhone or whatever. So obviously we can use this to also see what you guys are doing. So from the trend perspective, for instance, we could see how people would go from one room to the other. If we see drops in one controller going to the other, means that a lot of people change rooms because they are divided from one side to the other side of the rooms. At the same time, we obviously see how much you guys use and produce. So if we quickly select back again the conference, you see the last 2 days that it's quite a vast amount of people connecting and not really disconnecting anymore, whereas most smartphones actually connect and disconnect automatically. So that means you guys are continuously checking your phones, or you're continuously doing something for work on your laptop, obviously. As said, the bandwidth used is about 370, 376 megabits, so some room there. If we look at the division of the stations, this is obviously instantaneously now taken from the entire conference. We see that, well, I would say about 60-65% of all clients is connected on 5 gigahertz, which is obviously what we want. But apart from that, we obviously also still want you to connect on 2.4, which is the lower red line here in this graph, and the same if we look at the other controller. Why? It is just capacity that we have for you. And if we can use everything that we have, the experience from your side will be better. In general, if we do the testing ourselves while a complete room is full, depending on the amount of people in the room, say these smaller rooms are about 350 people, the bigger rooms are about 700, then normally what we try to achieve is that you get about 4 to 5 megabits per person. Depending on the usage, you will see that it goes up to 35, 40 megabits. If really a lot of people, again, are checking their agenda and doing work-related stuff, then it might actually drop to half a megabit to 1 megabit. But there should still be sufficient resources in the system to help you guys come through the next couple of years and having you enjoy the network here at the Devoxx conference. And if you should have any questions related to this, always welcome to come and ask them. Yes, sir. No, we have looked at putting like a proxy server locally, since, as you have seen, a lot goes to the same amount of addresses. Everything that's Amazon Cloud, and well, we see these days quite a lot of Azure as well. But thing is, we can dream of an ideal setup. That would actually include more than the caching server. It would also mean that we would have a separate DHCP server, redundant setup. But unfortunately, there's also one implication, and that's usually on the cost side. And even though we all just assume Wi-Fi will be there and that the Wi-Fi will be good, it definitely comes at a certain cost. And we try to offer both you and the organization the best possible system for the money that they want to spend on it, which is not less, but yeah, that means that systems like that are not being used. The same, for instance, with the DHCP server. We just earlier today discovered a bug in the system where actually all the logging that we were taking to make this presentation even better actually made the firewall crash, because it for some reason the logging just continued growing, and it had somewhere a memory leak where it took over the system memory. And nobody got an DHCP address anymore because it just hadn't gotten any space anymore to put them in there. So interesting things to do, these kinds of conferences. You actually really get the chance to push all of your equipment to the limit, which is usually never the case in any other deployment. So we also learn a lot from these things. Anyone else? In a small way, yes. But it's not that we do a lot of things to really prevent you from doing anything harmful to other people. Like I said before, also on the firewall, we don't really disallow you to do anything. Attendees and partners and speakers, etc., are well separated from each other. They can't really do anything to each other, meaning that if one of you guys are trying to do anything to the demonstration the partners try to give, that would not work. If one of you would try to hack into the PC of another guy, we would actually, well, there would be ways to do that, to be honest. We can put that a lot more close. We could basically prevent you from doing anything connecting to other APs than the ones that we want, etc. But we also expect some, well, it's difficult to say it that way, but some maturity, knowing that what's good for you is good for another guy as well. And that it is still an open hotspot. And if you get into an open network, basically you're on your own. To protect yourself as far as possible, enabling your firewall, if needed, if you want to connect to the workspace, use a VPN. But it would actually be something that we could consider in doing the next year. Thing is, by the fact that this is quite a heavy load environment, um, doing more stuff on the system can have its influences on the experience itself as well. Like we've seen now, everything is really nicely divided, but I can actually enforce it even further, that it's really done on a basis of one by one, that you get onto this channel, that channel, and that everything is divided, and that in theory all of you should be with exactly the same amount of people on the number of radios that are present in the room. But also that comes at a cost, where it might be that people have or need longer time to connect to the system, and we want to keep it as seamless as possible, to get you as quickly as possible on the network, and that you don't have to bother about too many things at the same time. Other questions? Yes. Yes, and unfortunately that's something that has happened quite a lot. We have a system that can completely isolate that, but it's not active on this one. It would really enforce us to use different APs, or actually use them as an overlay, and they can really see, these are my authorized APs. This is the authorized SSID in this area. So even if you would copy the SSID, it would also be tied to the SSID, to the security used, to the brand of access points, to the MAC addresses of the APs. We can all define that. And then you could actually say, if you now see any other possible connection, just block that. So if someone else uses a Devoxx hotspot with the same encryption, we would still block that connection. Which is something, again, in my ideal world, and if I had to choose, that would be something that we would deploy. You never know how things go, and we are looking into a certain number of things, so it might well be that we come with that solution next year if we get a chance, and use that at the same time, so that you have then three radio access points, where we would then use one radio rather than for capacity at the moment, for scanning and for security reasons. Other remarks, questions, tips? No? All right. Let me quickly see if I can show you anything else of interest then. If we have a look at this, then you also see that the majority of devices deployed is Apple. It's roughly 40%, which is also what we see in a lot of the other statistics, where it basically goes between Apple and Samsung devices. From an OS perspective, a lot of Apple iOS 9. We do see iOS 10 as well, but to be honest, amongst you guys, I would have assumed that everybody would have changed to iOS 10 by now, which wasn't the case. From Google, we are quite used to seeing, well, around 3 different versions, like in this case, the KitKat Lollipop and Jelly Bean and Marshmallow, where Marshmallow is definitely the smallest part. So that it also includes, we have other systems to really monitor and act as clients on the network, and they will actually do the same things that you guys do, but they will report directly to us rather than to each other or to Twitter. And then what we see there is that all of these different versions really behave differently on the network, where it's quite clear that that older iOS versions or older Android versions might or might not have more throughput issues compared to others. So if you can, usually updating your device actually really helps. sometimes. Well, that's about it from my side, and thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of the conference.